was not terribly happy with the way that decision making was affecting my company. And it was often decision making that was devoid of facts or data. I found that offensive enough to create a software platform to change the paradigm of the business model of construction. Things that I know could result in fewer lawsuits and fewer insurance claims are resisted because there's sort of a psychological fear that if I know more, then I have more risk. So the less I know, the less risk I take on. My experience tells me that person's not going to know that, and you're kind of wasting your time.
This is The Litigator's Edge, the podcast where smart strategy, practical innovation, and real-world experience come together to move litigation forward. Each week, we sit down with attorneys, legal tech leaders, and trusted advisors who are rethinking how great legal work gets done. You'll hear how law firms are building a competitive advantage. These conversations are grounded, insightful, and designed to help you refine how you work and how you win. Here is your host, Aniket Sawant.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Litigator's Edge, the podcast where innovative attorneys reveal the strategies that have transformed their legal practice. My name is Aniket Sawant, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Threadio. My guest today is a rare combination of trial lawyer, co-founder, and innovator. Over the past 25 years, she's litigated high-stakes cases, run a construction company, and created a patented data analytics platform for the construction industry. She has also served as in-house counsel for government contractors and is an internationally recognized expert on data privacy in construction technology. It's my privilege to welcome Tiffany Hosey to the platform. Tiffany, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tiffany, as you know, it's one of the things I always ask each of my guests is to come prepared with either a fun fact or a cringe joke. Which will it be for you, and what is it?
A fun fact is growing up, my mom and dad had a convenience store. They were entrepreneurs, and they had a liquor store, a convenience store, and a gas station. And the convenience store was named Tiffany's Mini Mart. So that's a fun fact.
And where was it located? Where were you?
At my home in Jackson, Mississippi. So it was there. It put me through college at Georgetown, and then in the 90s, it closed up.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's quite a story. And that's a perfect segue, I think, into my next question, which is that I consider every attorney who makes the time to be on this podcast to be a superhero. And every superhero has an origin story. And you gave us a little bit of a glimpse into yours, but can you please expand on it?
So I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, and I came to DC to go to college and ended up staying for law school, and then ended up staying longer once I got licensed to practice in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I was a practicing trial attorney for a decade or so, and then got a brilliant idea with my family to start a family construction company. And I ran that for another decade. All the gray hairs bears out the years of experience. But I got a Class A contractor's license in Virginia, certified in quality control construction management by the Corps of Engineers, and then worked for 2 years on a construction site and had the brilliant idea that I was not terribly happy with the way that decision making was affecting my company. And it was often decision making that was devoid of facts or data. It was really based on I think so. And I found that offensive enough to create a software platform to sort of change the paradigm of the business model of construction and really inject a way of quality control that's really based on objective fact gathering rather than objective opinions. So from there, it took on a life of its own. And then I created a company around this software that I created, and then got enticed to go back to practice law at this wonderful law firm, Pearson Ferdinand, which is a very innovative, technology-forward company. And it allows me to do both. So that's where I am today.
That's an amazing journey. Most people spend their careers sort of on one track, and maybe if you're adventurous, you take 2 tracks, but you have 3. And so, can you please share with us how sort of what was your journey in terms of did you quit your practice and then move to the or then found the construction company and then run, start the analytics firm in parallel? Were these things serial or parallel, I guess is my question.
They started out serial. So I stopped practicing law to do the construction work. And, I show up at 5 o'clock on the construction site, can't be in the law firm at the same time. So I did that. And my husband at the time was still a practicing attorney on Capitol Hill. So we sort of had that, the financial ability because he was still working and we were making money on contracts as well for our company. So I did both. And then while working on the construction site is when I developed the software. I took first one of those netbooks onto the job site. But then when I took the iPad out, that's when other contractors were very curious about the hardware. So they would come up to me and want to look at the iPad. But then when they saw the software, I found myself holding court, so to speak, on the construction site with various contractors asking if I could create the software for their business purposes. And that's how it took on a life of its own. And then when things started to slow down a bit, I was able to pick up some government contracting work. So I was doing some in-house work with some government contracting firms. And then later, COVID happened. All of our new contracts with this construction company closed up. And then the software company, all of our contracts came offline. So I ended up really being in a position where I took care of some life issues. I took care of my mother who had dementia at the time, and then ended up back into a law firm setting. And the only way I could get enticed back into a law firm setting was if someone told me that it was with the forward-thinking group of people that I'm now working with, because going back into a traditional practice was not appealing, but the way that they do business in this firm really excited me.
That's amazing. We'll come back to your current firm in a moment. To me, your move from the second track, which is a construction company, to the analytics firm, that makes a lot of sense. You saw certain challenges, certain issues with the way things were done, as you mentioned, and then that led to the analytics firm. That makes a lot of sense. What were the drivers for moving from the practice of law, including things like, you did medical malpractice and things like that, to the construction company? Can you maybe share a little bit of the thinking there?
So, I just had a baby, and I was, as a trial attorney, it's very difficult to sort of disengage once you leave the office. And I was coming home with this scowl on my face because inevitably I'm arguing with some opposing counsel on some, ridiculous issue. And I just didn't want to be that parent that was always, like really, uptight and angry, right? I wanted to be this freer parent who smiled all the time. And so when we had the opportunity to do the construction company, it just, I'm not risk averse, obviously. And I decided with my husband at the time that this would be an ideal setup given the circumstances we were presented with. And it was something new. And I have this mind that's always looking to learn new things and interested. So it ended up being pretty a seamless transition. I didn't plan it. I just said, the idea was brought to me. I was like, okay, let's do it.
That's amazing. That is truly entrepreneurial, and I respect that, and I dare say I identify with that. So that's fantastic. Going back to your current firm now. So you mentioned a couple of times that they're very they're very forward thinking. They have innovation at the forefront. I saw your website; it does say innovation. What are some ways in which your current firm differentiates itself from maybe some of the other firms that you were looking at?
So this firm is 100% remote. And the way that they're able to do it is they have created an environment of transparency, and they do the transparency through technology. And so it makes it very easy to, instead of dropping by someone's office, walking down the hallway, just pop up with a Teams invite, a Teams meeting, and you just jump on and have conversations with colleagues. We also have a lot of tools that the firm has enabled us to use, AI tools to help with, litigation, with transactional work. We have meetings that they have guest speakers come in to talk about some of the latest and greatest things in technology. And we actually have a dedicated person who's out there scouring the universe of possibilities for technology tools to help law firms and lawyers do what they do better. And so I think, being in an environment where you're not driven by you have to get X number of billable hours monthly or yearly. It's more about you build up your own practice and you can assist other partners on their practices as you want. Really, it's what you make of your position as a partner is really within your control. And it's not really dependent on what someone else is like. When I was an associate, how much business I'm going to be able to get from a particular partner is really driven by relationships within the firm and then what you bring to the table. And then you work as much as or as little as you want.
That is amazing. That does sound forward thinking, not just from a technology perspective, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but also from a process and people perspective. So that's pretty cool. So if you now fast forward to your current litigation or your current legal career, what fraction of it is litigation versus transaction? Because you mentioned both when you gave your overview of the current firm.
My practice primarily, I would say about 80% of my work is construction litigation. And 10% is other litigation and maybe some corporate counseling, like reviewing contracts and maybe here and there, maybe some employment issues. But for the lion's share of my work, it's definitely construction litigation.
Fascinating. And so, how would you say that your deep knowledge and expertise, first with the construction company that you founded, and then obviously with your data analytics platform, how does that inform the guidance that you give your clients on the construction litigation side, and maybe vice versa? What lessons have you learned from your construction litigation experience that you bring back to your analytics platform and potentially to the company?
That's a really great question, because before I started the construction company, like you mentioned before, I was doing a lot of medical malpractice defense of doctors and hospitals, right? I really perceived myself as to be a general litigator, but the like same situation, 80% of my work really was defending doctors and hospitals in med mal cases. Fast forward now, coming back into law and doing construction litigation after having worked on a construction site and then building my tech company in the construction space, where I've had an opportunity to talk to owners of projects, to general contractors and the subcontractors about the challenges that they have and the issues that I try to address through my software, my data tech company, are the exact issues that I counter in the litigation of cases. And that's, we have situations where there is a huge paucity of great record keeping. I mean, there you can have pictures, but they're not tied to any particular locations. There's a lot of theory about what happened when there's a construction issue, but there are very few facts and data to support the theory. And so my understanding of that challenge with the industry and the technologies that have market share really does lend well to me being able to hone in very quickly on defenses of our clients.
That's amazing, and that's certainly a unique perspective. One fun fact that I will offer to our audience based on our previous conversation was that you also happen to hold a patent in Japan. Can you please expound on that and share what that's about and how that relates to the rest of your program?
Yeah, so I actually applied for a patent, WIPO, the international patent for the European Union, Japan, some other jurisdictions in the United States. And they were pending for many years, like 8 years in the United States. But Japan was the first one to give me a patent. And the irony is, of all places, that's where I studied in college, and I was fluent in Japanese when I graduated from college. So I'm like, of all the places, the one place where at least, I have some connection to other than the United States, I did get a patent there. So that was actually pretty cool.
That is amazing. So your patent in Japan is kind of not really related to the fact that you're fluent in Japanese in any real way.
No, it's just it's a coincidence. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned briefly that you've served as in-house counsel to federal government contractors, primarily women, veteran-owned, minority businesses. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you do there or have done there, and especially about the challenges that those businesses face?
Well, I don't do any of that work anymore. But when I did do it, it was really just contract reviews. They were drafting teaming agreements or subcontractor agreements for various kinds of work. Um, and usually they were the smaller companies, the low man on the totem pole. So it's always a power dynamic. And a lot of the concerns that people have is they feel like they can't push back too much on contract terms that are not advantageous to them for fear of being replaced. So, but I I was very persuasive in giving them arguments of why, certain terms should be modified so that they were less onerous on them. But yeah, but and now I can't even imagine what that environment for those contractors are because it's changed so much and the playing field of or the leverage that smaller businesses had in terms of being able to have access to projects that the larger businesses would naturally bid on, I think has diminished. And so I'm sure it's quite a challenging environment for those companies to try to get work when the bidding process is really, it's really changed dramatically.
Thank you for sharing that. Going back to technology and the use of technology within your current firm, you mentioned that obviously the firm is innovative, you're 100% remote, you have a dedicated person or team looking at various tools. Can you share some examples or of how your firm goes about evaluating technologies for use within your firm, and what are some of the concerns or misconceptions that you might have seen, not necessarily in your firm, but among just attorneys that you interact with generally about technology and AI? I understand that's a compound question, but I wanted to ask it.
So I'm not really involved in that, but I do know that we have a tech director. There are conferences that are really designed specifically for law firms where technology platforms will have a display of what they do and introduce them to firms. So I know that our firm participates quite heavily in that. And I think we just won an award from Clio last year, maybe this year, for our firm's use of Clio, and we use it extensively within the firm. What was the second
Yes,
part?
and the second one is in your experience, looking, in your interactions with attorneys outside of your firm, maybe from more traditional firms or backgrounds. Clearly, there's a lot of, there's a lot of concerns with technology and especially with AI. What are some of those concerns that you've seen, and what have your conversations been in terms of assuaging or otherwise discussing those concerns with?
It's an interesting question because I actually have attorneys I've talked to who have a knee-jerk reaction like, oh, I don't want to use that. And some of the platforms will, depending on how you prompt it and what you're asking it to do, it will give you a lot of analysis, a lot. And the reflex is, well, if it's going to do all that, I'm going to take more time reviewing the analysis by the AI platform than it would for me to just do it. Or it's like having an associate do something and you have to, really closely review it for accuracy and for proper analysis. There is a reflex that they can do it faster than it would take for them to double check behind an AI platform that sort of processed information. And I'm still learning, even with a tech company, I still am trying to figure out how to make it work best for me. So the jury's still out for me, because I see the value with certain kinds of certain, but I think it's going to take me some time to get real comfortable with it, and I think that's just natural with any new technology.
Absolutely makes sense, because in the case of AI specifically, this is true as you mentioned for any new technology, but it's fast moving, and the funny part is nobody exactly knows how it works, not even the creator. So it's very sort of advanced in some ways and not so advanced in some other ways. And so all opinions are probably true based on the use case that you have, which is that it's excellent versus not, or I need more time to I review it than to actually do the work myself. So all of those opinions, in my experience of conversations with attorneys, are also true.
Well, I'll just add, there's one of my partners that said that he loves it because he said when he was in trial, he would get a trial transcript and something would be said during trial, and immediately his partner would jump on this particular AI platform, put the transcript in the AI platform and look for certain language and then draft a motion right there, just instantaneously, and it would be really well done. And so I've not had that opportunity to use it in that sort of scenario, but I could see how that could be very valuable in terms of being able to be, very quick reacting to things that pop up during the fierceness of the back and forth of a trial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Taking a step back and sort of looking at the broader sweep of your career and where you are today, especially at the intersection of construction and technology, where do you see the future of the construction industry from the perspective of both being an entrepreneur in the space as well as being a litigator? Where do you see that? That's my first question. I'll ask my second question.
That's a really interesting question because I've been asked that question for the past decade. And the things that I thought might happen have not happened. And that's because I'm kind of understanding more the psychology of the construction industry. And it's an industry that really is concerned about assuming risk and risk shifting. And to the extent that you have technologies that can help shift risk, eliminate risk, diminish risk, there's real hesitancy towards embracing it. Things that I know could really change productivity in construction, which would result in fewer lawsuits and fewer insurance claims, are resisted because there's sort of a psychological fear that for example, if I know more, then I have more risk. So the less I know, the less risk I take on. And I don't know really how to crack that code because that's not true. You can avoid a lot of harm, a lot of bad outcomes with more information. So I'm not real sure if there's going to be a big shift anytime in the near future, in the near term. I'm not sure.
That's a fascinating point. So, and what I gather from that, if I sort of connect the dots a little bit, is that your analytics firm actually provides more information, and so you would firmly land on the side of, hey, I have more information, so I can better manage my risk. But what I'm hearing you say, Tiffany, is that that's not necessarily how the construction industry or many folks in the construction industry.
Yeah, it's not. And I don't I don't know how to crack that code. It's really an educational thing, and I think it's just going to take some time. I was talking to someone about how different things are done. For example, in Japan, where they use technology and they're not afraid of it. And when I say they use technology, not afraid of it, like they're so far ahead in terms of the kinds of technologies they embrace. And the difference between Japan and the United States is a lot of their directives in terms of what technologies are used or have the seal of approval come from the government down. And we're as a capitalist society, everything comes from the bottom up. So if there were more sort of directions from the government that said, this is what we want, and these are the things that we can do to support that, then I think it would be different. But we're not quite there yet.
Tiffany, that's an interesting perspective, just from the viewpoint of a generalist, because I would imagine just the common perception is that the U.S. in general is at the forefront of innovation, etc. Capitalism and innovation and capitalism go hand in hand, and sort of move things forward. And that Japan was sort of a more risk-averse, slower-moving technology. But what I'm hearing from you, at least in the construction space, is that it seems to be the opposite. That's just very interesting.
When you say that there's a perception that Japan is more risk averse, I think that they're less risk averse when it comes to technology.
Yeah,
It just looks that way to me.
that's amazing. So now taking a step back and sort of looking back at, again, the entirety of your career. Let's say there's a young lawyer who's maybe just out of law school, and they're also sort of looking at where they are in life, and they have an entrepreneurial itch in addition to obviously their legal training. What advice would you give to such a lawyer today, against today's technological, social context. And how do you think they can sort of successfully navigate the path from being a legal professional to an inventor and a business owner, maybe in series or in parallel? What would you tell them?
Well, I would definitely say do it in parallel. And that a law degree and legal training really does prepare you to do a lot of different things that don't have to do with the everyday practice of law. No, you can't go out and be a brain surgeon, but you could become, entrepreneur that creates a technology platform, right? You could be a policy person. So one of the things that I tell young people is you can have a plan, but never close your mind to the possibilities. Things will present themselves in your life that you did not see coming, but have an open mind about your approach to it and whether or not it's something that you're interested in. Because I think a lot of lawyers get bored easily. And so having a curious mind and being able to explore things that interest you, I think you should give yourself the freedom to do that and not feel confined to, oh, I decided to go to law school and that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I think you can, really, if you find a Pearson Ferdinand, you can do lots of things.
It's amazing. For lawyers who better want to understand, or let me say that again, for lawyers who want to better understand the business and technology of the industries that they serve. In your case, it was construction. There could be obviously other industries that other attorneys are interested in. What is one resource or habit that you'd recommend for gaining that real world perspective? Obviously, one could be, doing the activities and doing something entrepreneurial in the space independent of law. But what are some ways that an attorney could go about gaining that perspective?
That's a good question. I never thought about it because my experience was literally doing it, like working on a construction site. And I don't think there's any real substitution for that because the depth and breadth, I mean, you can learn a small bit of something by dipping your toe in and experiencing it, but there's nothing to replace the experience of just really fully immersing yourself in something and understanding the language because the language of construction is very different. The social norms, what's normal, what are the normal industry practices of construction. And the only way knew that is because I do it. And actually, I find myself using that knowledge in my practice of law every day. There's a lawyer who may not have had the experiences that I have that will make assumptions about what you should be able to find out in a case or by doing a deposition or something like that. And my experience tells me that person's not going to know that, and you're kind of wasting your time, barking up that tree. But yeah, I think I'm not experienced dipping my toe in anything. I just throw myself fully into things.
That's amazing. It almost goes back to what you said a few minutes ago, where having more information reduces your risk, increases your knowledge, and knowledge is power. So it sounds like you lived that through your career, which is fantastic. Well, Tiffany, this has been a fantastic conversation. Last question for you: is there a question that I should have asked you that I did not?
Why did I study in Japan of all places, and how did that influence or have an effect on my legal career? My professional career. I studied in Japan, and I studied there because I was fascinated by the language when I was in high school. When I saw the written characters, I thought it would look more like art than a language. So I wanted to learn how to do that. And so when I got to college and I studied and I had the opportunity to travel to Japan, I experienced the culture and the food and the people, and I was fascinated again by the technology. And so my understanding and fascination with Japan didn't stop when I finished college. I've continued following that country and its technological developments, particularly in the construction space. And so that has really informed how I view the possibilities of what we can do as a country to improve productivity in construction. So yeah.
Amazing. One final follow-up question to that. In addition to the advances in technology in the construction space, are there any cultural elements of Japan that you particularly admire and maybe try to adopt and use in your day-to-day life, either professionally or personally?
Well, that's a great question. There's sort of this interesting respectfulness in terms of how strangers greet each other and treat each other, and people who know each other, how they treat each other, that is beautiful. And especially today, I wish we had more of that sort of very respectful approach to relationships and spaces and just how we treat each other day to day. And that's something that, I really admire about that culture. I wish we could adopt some more of that here.
Absolutely. On that note, Tiffany, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time and your insights. I enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our audience will as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
The Litigator's Edge podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.